Ethan had been winding down for the night, the quiet of his small Oregon apartment settling around him like a soft blanket, when a sudden knock at the door made him pause. At first, he thought it might be the wind rattling the frame or a neighbor, but the knock came again, deliberate, hesitant, almost shy. Curious and slightly uneasy, he opened the door and froze for a moment, confronted by a sight he wasn't expecting. There, standing in the dim light of the porch, was Linda Parker, his best friend Jake's mother. Her coat was only half-buttoned, her hair messy, and her eyes red and glossy, betraying the effects of wine and tears. She looked both fragile and strong, a mix of vulnerability and quiet dignity that made Ethan's chest tighten. She murmured an apology, her voice small, trembling, yet filled with a sincerity that made him step aside without a second thought. Linda quietly entered, settling on the edge of his couch, her hands folded tight in her lap as if they might give her courage. The air between them was heavy, charged with unspoken emotions, and Ethan realized immediately that this was not a casual visit. She needed someone, and somehow, he felt the weight of her trust pressing gently against him. He had known Linda for years in the ordinary, bright moments, school events, birthdays, casual dinners, but he had never seen her like this. She was someone entirely different now, raw and open, and it startled him to see the depth of loneliness in her eyes. Ethan didn't speak at first, he just watched as she seemed to shrink slightly into herself, battling with whatever had driven her to his doorstep at this late hour. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the heater and the muffled wind outside, creating a strange intimacy between them. Her whispered confession, "I just need help," hung in the air like a fragile plea, and Ethan felt an unexpected rush of protectiveness and concern. He nodded almost automatically, feeling that unspoken promise that he would not turn her away. In that moment, he understood that something had shifted in their relationship, even if he couldn't yet define it. The night felt different, the shadows longer, and Ethan realized that the course of events from this knock onward could change everything, revealing sides of people, including himself, that he had never seen before. Ethan moved quietly, making tea while Linda sat on the edge of the couch, her hands wrapped around the warm mug as if it could hold her together. He didn't ask questions, knowing that sometimes silence is the most important comfort. The soft steam from the tea filled the room, carrying a calm that contrasted sharply with the tension lingering in the air. Linda's voice was fragile when she finally spoke, admitting she shouldn't be there, that she felt lost and scared, and Ethan simply nodded, telling her she was safe. She laughed once, a soft, sad sound, recalling how she used to reassure her son, Jake, in the same way. The room was quiet for a long moment, heavy with emotions neither of them fully understood yet. Then she began to speak, carefully, almost as if each word weighed on her, revealing the emptiness she felt in her marriage, a life that looked fine from the outside but was hollow inside. She admitted that she smiled, hosted dinners, pretended, and yet felt completely unseen, that tonight she realized how much she had been carrying alone, how long it had been since anyone had truly noticed her as more than a mother or a hostess. Ethan listened, feeling a strange mix of sadness and respect, his heart tightening with empathy for her vulnerability. He understood her loneliness, her fear, the quiet desperation that had brought her to his apartment, and he felt both honored and nervous that she had trusted him enough to speak. Linda's eyes met his briefly, filled with a raw honesty that was startling and beautiful, not in a romantic way but in the powerful connection of two humans acknowledging pain and longing. "I came because I trust you," she admitted, and Ethan felt the weight of those words sink in, the unspoken plea behind them. She asked him to promise something small but monumental, and her tone was serious despite the traces of alcohol and sadness in her voice. In that moment, Ethan realized this night was a turning point, that he was witnessing a side of Linda that very few people ever saw, a side of her heart that was desperate for acknowledgement and kindness. Her vulnerability was almost tangible, filling the small apartment with a quiet intensity, and Ethan understood that his role in this night was more than just a bystander. He was the person she had chosen to lean on, to share the weight of her unspoken fears. The air was thick with emotion, each moment carrying the unspoken question of how far trust could go, how much could be shared without crossing lines, and Ethan felt the tension of that delicate boundary. Linda's voice, soft and almost trembling, spoke of fears and regrets, of moments lost and desires unfulfilled, and Ethan's heart went out to her, feeling both protective and profoundly connected to her pain. It was a night that neither would forget, a night when ordinary lives intersected in a way that was quiet yet transformative, where simple acts of listening and presence carried more weight than any grand gesture. The tea grew cold, the night stretched on, and Ethan sat with her in silence, understanding that sometimes just being there for someone, simply witnessing their truth, was the most meaningful act of all. And as Linda finally took a deep breath, looking at him with gratitude and a flicker of relief, Ethan realized that he had entered a moment of intimacy, not physical, not romantic in the usual sense, but a deep human connection, raw and real, that could never be undone, and that would linger in both of their hearts long after this night ended. Ethan felt the weight of Linda's words as she leaned closer, her voice trembling yet steady, revealing a request that took him by surprise. She asked him, in the most fragile, honest way, to promise her that if anything ever happened to her, he would make sure Jake never felt alone in the world. The request hit him harder than he expected, the vulnerability in her eyes making the room feel smaller, more intimate, charged with an unspoken gravity. She quickly added that she knew it sounded dramatic and blamed the wine, but Ethan could hear the truth behind the words, the long-held fear and love for her son that had driven her here tonight. He nodded gently, assuring her that her concern was not dramatic and that he understood completely, that her trust in him was not misplaced, and that he would honor her wish without question. The room fell into a quiet that was heavy yet comforting, filled with the weight of emotions neither had fully expressed before. Linda's relief was palpable, her posture softening as if a burden had been lifted slightly, and Ethan felt a strange mix of protectiveness, respect, and something tender stir within him, a recognition of her humanity and the depth of her feelings that went far beyond casual friendship. For a fleeting moment, they shared an unspoken understanding, a connection forged in vulnerability and mutual respect, a moment of silent recognition of two adults who felt deeply, who had both experienced longing, loss, and the quiet ache of unspoken truths. Yet even in that intimacy, boundaries remained clear. Ethan's heart raced as he realized how rare and precious such moments were, how trust could bring two people close without crossing lines, and how profoundly someone could impact your life in just a few hours. Linda wiped her eyes, embarrassed but relieved, and Ethan offered a gentle smile, acknowledging her courage and the weight of her confession. He stood to help her with her coat and promised to call a cab, ensuring she would not be alone for the rest of the night, honoring the delicate trust she had placed in him. She paused at the door, looking back with a soft, tired smile, telling him he was a good man, words that lingered in Ethan's mind long after she left. As the door closed behind her, the silence in the apartment felt both heavy and full of meaning, a reminder of the powerful human connections that could arise from unexpected vulnerability, the way small gestures of presence and understanding could leave lasting marks on a person's heart, and how sometimes, the most profound moments of intimacy were built on respect, trust, and the quiet acknowledgement of each other's struggles. Ethan remained standing, processing the depth of what had just occurred, aware that this night would stay with him forever, shaping his understanding of compassion, trust, and the delicate balance of human relationships. Weeks passed after that night, and life slowly returned to its familiar rhythm, yet for Ethan, nothing felt quite the same. The memory of Linda's visit lingered in his mind like a quiet echo, a mix of sorrow, respect, and a tender understanding he could not shake. She had sent a brief message once, thanking him and saying she was getting help, and that small note carried a weight far beyond its words, a silent reassurance that she was finding her path back to herself. Ethan never spoke of that night to anyone, not to Jake, not to anyone else, because it was hers and his alone, a fragile secret rooted in trust and respect. Yet, in those quiet moments, he often found himself reflecting on the lessons he had learned, how loneliness could hide behind smiles, how unspoken fears could weigh heavily on a person, and how simple acts of listening and presence could mean more than grand gestures or advice. Months later, at Jake's birthday dinner, the ordinary gathering of friends and family took on a subtle, almost magical significance for Ethan. Across the table, he caught Linda's eye, and for a fleeting moment, they shared a soft, knowing smile, a silent acknowledgement of what had passed between them, a connection unspoken yet deeply felt. There was no crossing of boundaries, no inappropriate intentions, only a quiet, profound understanding that sometimes the most meaningful bonds are built on trust, empathy, and the courage to be vulnerable. Ethan realized that the night had changed him, had made him more aware of the quiet battles people face, the hidden longings and fears that shaped their lives, and the ways in which kindness and attentiveness could leave an enduring mark on a human heart. As he looked around the room at friends and family laughing, celebrating, living their ordinary lives, he understood the beauty of these small, everyday moments and the importance of being present, of noticing and valuing the people around him. He knew that the memory of that night would stay with him, not as a burden, but as a reminder of the power of empathy and quiet courage, of the subtle ways one life can touch another, and how respect, understanding, and emotional honesty could create bonds that, though invisible to the world, shaped the heart in profound and lasting ways. And though life moved forward, Ethan carried with him the knowledge that sometimes love and care were not loud or dramatic, they were gentle, steadfast, and deeply human, the kind that could sustain someone through their darkest moments without ever being spoken aloud, the kind that left both hearts quietly fuller, wiser, and forever changed.